My friends and I may have been in serious danger by OldDemon. I made a post about this same location almost a year ago. A friend and I were going to a haunted bridge, according to legend, and we were tailgated by 4 cars. Last night, Friday the 13th, my friends and I wanted to do something spooky for the occasion. I mentioned the bridge, and they all seemed pretty interested. None of these friends had ever been before, so I thought it would be a really cool experience for them to hear the history of the area. There were 7 of us, so we had to take 2 vehicles. When we made it to the bridge, it was about 2:30 a.m. Yes, I know it's not technically Friday the 13th anymore. We immediately walked under the bridge to where the legends say there are rituals and cult gatherings. We stayed under the bridge, snooping around for about half an hour, and then we decided to check the other side. As soon as we made it under the other side of the bridge, we began hearing a loud and constant splashing sound in the water. One of my friends was convinced it was something swimming towards us because it sounded like it was getting closer. Finally, we decided it was time to get out of there. When we made it back to the top of the bridge, a car slowly approached us from behind. Being that it's so late and people are unpredictable, some of my friends started to run, but I was finally able to convince them to act normal. The car passes us slowly as we walked up the road to where we parked our vehicles. The mysterious car then stops right next to our car and stays there. At this point, we don't know what to think. The car just waits for us, and we just kept walking. Finally, the car turns around and speeds past us. For a moment, we feel better because we thought it was leaving, but then we turned around to check. The car had stopped again and began turning back around towards us. We speed our walk up to get to our vehicles, and the mysterious car slowly crosses the bridge in our direction again. I was in the car with the 5 of the 7 people. The other 2 were in a separate truck. As the car makes its way to us, it stops right behind where we were parked on the side of the road. As we attempt to start our car, another mysterious vehicle speeds past us and begins to slow down at the top of the hill that was in front of us. It seemed as if they were trying to surround us. Our friend in the other vehicle pulls out and slowly passes a car that was waiting behind us. The mysterious car then switches into reverse and started chasing our friend's truck while driving backwards. My friend gets away without much trouble, but now we are facing this vehicle head on. We start making our way across the bridge, and the strange car positions itself in the middle of the bridge, blocking our path. At this point, we decided we were going to continue going straight, no matter what. We turn the car to the left, and the mysterious car moves to the left. We turn to the right, and it turns to the right. Finally, we faked the car out, and we were able to pass them quickly. When we made it to the end of the road, our friend was waiting on us. He didn't know the area so well, so we rolled down our windows to discuss where we were heading next. As we are talking, another completely different vehicle turns right past us and starts honking its horns at us. We finally decide on a direction to go. About 10 miles away from the bridge, halfway home, a totally different truck speeds up next to us, flashing their lights and honking their horns non-stop. It would speed up in front of us and then hit the brakes to let us pass, and it would repeat that cycle until it finally decided to turn off. We made it home at 4 a.m., and we have yet to figure out what happened there. It turns out I actually had a different group of friends who went to the bridge earlier that night. They claimed to hear the same splashing. They also claimed that they had heard noises of people talking in the woods. They left immediately. We were completely unaware of this when we arrived. My friends have begun planning another trip to the bridge, possibly during the day, to just sort of look around. We plan on bringing a gun next time, just in case. Jason Vorhees Scares a Girl Scout Troop by bugverde. I've lurked here for quite some time, and upon reflection, remembered something had happened to me when I was about 8, and obviously a Girl Scout. So this is about 1986, and Friday the 13th Part 6 has been released. My parents were never big on monitoring what I watched as a child, so I'd seen all of these movies to this point. I knew the noise and big bloody axes as staples. My scout troop is on an overnight retreat at some rec hall. I think it was attached to a church. My mom was a troop leader, and several other adults were there as chaperones. All us girls had fun that night, eating pizza and doing hair, trading charms from our Cracker Jack necklaces and such. We may even have watched a movie, family friendly for obvious reasons. It was time to tuck in for the night. After we all fought about who would sleep next to whom, got our sleeping bags laid out, and our pajamas on, the chaperones allowed us one last run around the hall for squealing, pulling hair, getting drinks, or bathroom breaks. Since this was a rec hall, there were no coverings on the windows. At one point during our last hurrah before bedtime, a group of us, myself included, saw some movement outside the window, which was in a hallway by the bathrooms. We huddled around the window looking. Then, about simultaneously, shat and pissed ourselves. Jason Voorhees stood outside the window, tapping with his axe. We screamed bloody murder. He disappeared. Chaperones came running, my mom included. They're confronted by a gasping, shrieking gaggle of girls, screaming, "The Friday the 13th guy is outside!" They didn't believe us. We were all crying, and I'm really shaken up because I've seen these movies and know what happens when Jason gets a hold of you. I guess when the chaperones saw we were still shook up, after 5 to 10 minutes had passed, my mom pulled me aside and asked me if we were playing a prank on them or not. I swore up, down, left, right, and sideways that no, we were not lying, and we saw Jason. So the chaperones decided to go check all the windows in the rec hall. They moved from one to another, and after a few minutes pass, I hear a woman cursing. Jason was standing outside the window. She was looking out. By then, adults and children are thoroughly scared shitless. Us kids think real-life Jason is outside, waiting to get his hands on us Girl Scouts. And the adults know that there's some pervert creeper outside dressed in a Jason Voorhees costume with an axe. We never found out if it was real or rubber. Who has been spying on little girls for an unknown length of time. Since these were the days before cell phones, and I'm not sure if 911 was active in our area yet, my mom had to comb through the phone book at the payphone to find the right police station to call. She called. They sent someone out, but I guess Jason ran off at some point after an adult saw him. The officer searched the perimeter of the church, looked around the outside of the rec hall, and did confirm that there were footprints in the dirt at the rec hall windows. Each window had a little bush and paving stones making a little horseshoe, so footprints would be easily seen in the dirt there. We never had another overnight retreat after that, and I hung up my Girl Scout uniform. I have no idea if they ever caught that pervert creeper. I'm guessing not, since I never heard anything more about it from my mom. Have also never watched any Friday the 13th movies since that day. The Stone Well, author unknown. In the year 1883, there lived the Clark family, a simple family of 3, in a tiny town named Dresden, Kansas. The small community had a population of 34 at the time. Joseph was an only child, and since there wasn't another 9-year-old within miles of their farm, he would have to invent his games. His father had built him toys made of wood and paint over the years, hoping to bring some joy to the son he loved and cared for most. Even to a 9-year-old child with a good imagination and an unquenchable thirst for adventure, Joseph needed more. Jonathan surprised his son with 2 tin cans connected by a string. He told Joseph to take one end and run in the opposite direction until the line was tight. It was a good 30 feet long. Jonathan yelled to Joseph to put the can to his ear and listen. He was able to hear his father's voice say, "Hello," as if he were standing right next to him. Eventually, after Joseph had exhausted almost every idea of what to do with the cans, he thought he'd drop one can down into the stone well on the edge of their property. How exciting this was for Joseph to hear what it sounds like down at the bottom of a well. What mysteries lay down there? Does something scary live down there in the dark? One cold morning, Jonathan awoke early with a sense of unease. Joseph's bed was empty. Without shoes or a coat, he raced out into the front yard and shouted Joseph's name. In a panic, he thought of the only place his son could be, and that was the well. A single tin can lay where Joseph usually sat. His son never wandered off far from the property. The stones that created the sides of the well were much too high for a 9-year-old to fall in. After weeks of searching, the Clark family gave up. Joseph's disappearance was going to remain a mystery to his parents forever. The following spring, Jonathan was out working when the tin can caught his eye, lying 5 feet from the well. Setting down the junk in his arms, he raised the tin can to his mouth and whispered, "Joseph, I love you so much." He waited a few seconds before moving it to his ear, with the slightest hope that he would hear his son's voice echo through the can. All he heard was the sound of the other tin can tapping against the stone walls of the well, which was soon followed by silence. He felt slight tension on the string attached to the can before a soft voice spoke in his ear.
"He's much happier with us."
He quickly dropped the can and began pulling up the string that connected the cans. He fell back in shock when he saw there was no other tin can, just a piece of string. Cabin by Monechetti. My family abandoned me in this forest to die. I tried to figure out why for a very long time, but I decided that it didn't matter. I survived the first week by finding a water supply and finding good berries. through painful trial and error. That's the problem with being stuck in the forest. It is difficult at first to find what plants you can eat. I've never been good at hunting, and I had no equipment, so I was forced to test my way through every piece of fruit, every tuber and root, and every leaf that I didn't already know was poisonous. I made a makeshift cabin that I have slowly built up over the years with makeshift stone implements. Once I had gotten the hang of using my stone tools, I made a trap, and after about a week, I heard it spring. To my surprise, it was not a bird or a bunny, but rather a cat. What had to have been a Maine Coon, based on its size. It had no fear in it for me, and instead was as obedient as a dog. I had tried finding a way out of the forest for years, but no matter how far I walked, in any direction, it just seemed to be too far away from the forest's edge. My legs had been broken at one point in my youth, and they did not heal correctly, so I could not go very far, which added to the difficulty. After I found the cat, she would hunt birds for me, but it was never enough food. She would nudge the dead animals towards me, but I would shake my head. No reason for us both to starve, dear. And I would eat my berries and my plants, and let her indulge in the spoils of her victory. I continued to grow weaker and lose weight, and the cat clearly had a look of concern about her. I woke one morning to find that she had left. I fretted so much. Oh, how I worried. But in the early afternoon she came back, and with 2 young children chasing her and laughing. I was amazed that she had somehow found civilization, and for a second I relished the idea of finally being saved from my years-long ordeal in this hellish wilderness. And then the cat nudged the 2 children forward, which made them giggle. They bent down to pet her, and in that moment I thought that maybe I didn't want to leave my forest home. That night, as I rested with a full stomach for the first time in a decade, with the sounds of new children chasing my cat up the hillside, I decided that this cabin was not so bad after all. Ryan's Spicy Meats by the Prowler. As I sit on the couch watching the news, heavy-eyed about to doze off, I hear the dramatic music. I open my eyes and see breaking news flash across the ticker. Looks like it's a double murder. Another young couple was found slaughtered. Hollowed out, if you will. That's 4 murdered this week, 20 murdered this month, and God only knows how many over the past year. Part of me is sad to see another young couple slain by our town's serial killer, but the other part of me is glad for another order of meat for the restaurant. You see, I am the proprietor of Ryan's Spicy Meats, barbecue, and other lavish meat assortments, and I know who the serial killer is. The strange gentleman works for me in my restaurant and keeps it supplied with cuts of meat from his victims on a weekly basis. I met the man a little over a year ago when he came in and applied for the job. He was odd, to say the least, and seemed not to have possession of all his faculties. But nonetheless, times were tough, and I needed help in the restaurant, and hired him on the spot. He was a pretty hard worker, no complaints in that department. I put him on the cashier and he was fine. But after a few weeks I received complaints from customers and a few of his fellow co-workers about his strange, odious scent that wafted from his body. And to tell you the truth, I noticed it too. He smelled like 2 dead beavers trapped inside an old fur trapper. So after work one day, it was just him and me closing up the restaurant. And after he clocked out, I stopped him and told him about the complaints. Then I informed him I was transferring him to the back of the house, where his new duties would be janitorial arts. He asked why, and once again I told him of the odious complaints, and proceeded to tell him I couldn't have an employee with such bad hygiene up front. He went on and on about not having bad hygiene, but I had to point out to him that he did, and every time he turned around or bent over, people could see his swamp ass. I became quite insistent that he had the swampiest of asses, as a matter of fact, because one could see the moist circle on the back of his pants. Well, let's just say he didn't take too kindly to these comments, and me moving him to the back. Out of nowhere, he proceeded to pull out a knife and lunged at me. I tripped over a bucket and fell on my ass. I remember a TV being on above me on the counter, and on it was the news, and they were talking about the first of the serial killings. He then laughed, pointed at the TV, and said that he did that, and there would be more to come. Well, I thought I was going to be the next victim, but thankfully he listened to what I had to say and spared me. I thought something sly up quick and told him that his secret was safe with me, and he could even carry out his killings in the restaurant. I threw in a little something beneficial for me and the restaurant by telling him to carve them up and store the meat in the freezer. With meat prices being what they are today, I figured this was a perfect opportunity for me. I even said he could keep his job up front, despite the swamp ass. Well, he agreed, and here we are. He's continuing his killings. The restaurant is booming, about to open new franchises all over the country, all supplied by his meats and successful murderous pursuits. So stop on by. Ryan's Spicy Meats. Try Jack's Racco Ribs or Agatha's Brisket Sandwich. And bring the kitties, why don't ya? But be careful, because if you're ever confronted by a smelly man with a Ryan's employee shirt on, your name might be added to the menu. Next. There was a new star in the sky last night, and now everyone is acting strange. By C. Benson, 1273. I woke up this morning with a raging headache. I was out late last night celebrating a big win at work, and afterward I came straight home and crashed. I took an aspirin, showered, and dressed, watching a YouTube clip from yesterday about the explosion in TCRB. Amazing how something 3,000 light years away could get so much attention here. But I guess new stars don't come along every day, more like every 80 years, according to the experts. I left my apartment and saw Miss Simmons in the hallway. I usually avoided her. She always wanted to gossip about the neighbors. But today, she just looked at me with a weird smile. I greeted her and walked to the stairs. I left my building and walked to the subway station. Without paying much attention to anyone around me, I swiped my pass and boarded the train. As I sat in the car, something seemed different than usual. It took a second, but then I realized what it was. The noise I was used to. People chattering on their phones, playing videos, speaking rudely to each other, was gone. It was completely silent. I looked up and realized why. No one on the entire train was talking. Instead, they were all staring at me. And they all had the same look on their faces, a warped, disturbed smile, like they were seeing something that wasn't part of this world. I hurried off the train, wanting to get away as quickly as possible. But as I walked down the street, I noticed more and more people looking at me the same way. I started running, bursting through the door of my office, glad to have made it. Then I looked up. My coworkers, people I worked with every day, were wearing that same smile. They slowly began to walk towards me. Shit! I turned and fled the building, desperate to get away. But everywhere I turned, people with that same terrifying smile were approaching me. I turned a corner, but 3 people were waiting. So I doubled back, and a line of them turned as one in my direction. Panicking, I ran through a store entrance, sprinting through the store and heading for the back door. But as I emerged, I ran into a crowd of 20 people, closing in on me, surrounding me. I tried to run away, but they were on me in seconds. They grabbed me by my arms and legs, forcing me to the ground on my back. One of them grabbed my head and forced it upwards, while another grabbed my eyelids and pried them open. Despite my struggles, they succeeded in pointing my eyes skyward. And there I saw it, a bright star, exploding against the morning sky, shining in the heavens, brighter than the sun, holding the answers to all the mysteries of the universe. It was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I began to smile. There's a Monster in Mommy's Belly by FestiveWreath. There's a monster in Mommy's belly. It grows bigger and bigger every day. I think if it gets much bigger, she'll just go like a balloon that someone put too much air in. She tells me that it's not a monster, that it's going to be a new little brother, that she won't pop like a balloon, but she'll go to the hospital one day and come back the next with a little baby. She says that Daddy helped put the baby into her belly, so it will grow big like me. Sometimes, when she lays down, I can see it moving. She says that's what happens with all babies, and if Daddy and I are really lucky, maybe we could put our hands on her belly and feel his little feet kicking. Mommy says that I must be gentle when the new baby comes out of her belly, and not to touch him unless she or Daddy is with me. She says that a little baby is as fragile as the ornaments that we hang on our Christmas tree. I guess I have to be careful around him, or he will shatter into a billion little shiny pieces like that glass ball I dropped last year. And my hand would hurt, and I would cry and cry until Daddy gave me ice cream and snuggled me real tight. Mommy says it's my new little brother in her belly, but I know that it's really a scary monster. I know that when it comes out of Mommy's belly, it will have horns on its head and huge fangs and tentacles all over the place, and it will make loud noises and try to hurt me. I know that Mommy thinks it's just a little fragile glass ornament baby that Daddy helped put there to grow, but Daddy told me that it's a monster. Daddy says he didn't put that monster in Mommy's belly, and I'd better be careful or it would gobble me up. Daddy says that he loves me very much, and he says that the monster is dangerous. He told me that I should take the sharp, pointy knife from the kitchen drawer, the one I was never supposed to touch. He told me just this time that it would be okay for me to touch it, and that I should take it and stick it into Mommy's belly to save us from the monster. I can see now that it isn't a technically monster after all, just a normal baby like my dolls. I think I'll like having a little brother. I just wish he wasn't all red. If he had to be a color other than brown and stuff like me, I think I would like a green baby more than this sticky, wet red one. Maybe when Mommy wakes up, I will tell her to make the next one green. A Child in Vengeance. Author unknown. I woke up to my daughter screaming her lungs out from down the hall. I turned over to my husband, already staring at me with bloodshot eyes. Together, we rose wearily out of bed and opened our daughter's door to reassure her. "What is it, honey?" I asked, my gentle tone of voice not giving away the frustration I was feeling. "There was somebody in here, and he said he was going to get revenge." Despite myself, I let out an amused chuckle. "Revenge? For what?" "For his dead family," she whispered softly. The irritation returned. Her father must have been letting her watch scary movies. I glared at him only to see him apparently taking this completely seriously. "Honey," he said slowly, "what did they look like?" She sobbed. Now I was gritting my teeth to avoid chewing out my husband for feeding into her fears. Before I could say anything, my daughter managed to choke something out. "He had red hair and a crooked nose, and he was so mean and scary." Before I knew it, my husband was halfway down the hallway. I rushed out after him as our daughter's inconsolable cries drifted out into the hallway. I approached to confront him, but was cut short. He started talking, and I was surprised to hear a tinge of fear to his voice. "You know how before we met, I worked for the mob." I knew this, at least sort of. Before we got married, he told me how he was in the witness protection program and had a somewhat sordid past, though he had never divulged details. He said he preferred to leave that past completely behind him. I'd never even met his parents. He didn't wait for an answer before continuing. "One time, my boss sent me after someone to send a message. I broke into his house, did away with all his daughters and his only son, and left them sprawled out in their own blood for him to find." My daughter wailed behind me as I felt like throwing up. "But why are you telling me?" The person she described. Revenge for his family. He was pale, showing more fear than I had ever thought he could have in him. It dawned on me. "Oh God, we need to get her out of here. Call the cops. Christ, he's in our house." I tried to sprint back through the door, only for my husband to grab me. "Let go! We have to stop him. How could you?" "It's no use. There's no stopping it." I struggled against his grip, tight despite his trembling. I hissed desperately, "He's going to kill our daughter. You killed his children, and you brought us into this. How did he even find us?" "It's not him. He didn't have red hair or a crooked nose." "What?" I managed to whimper. "His son did." My blood ran cold, and suddenly the silence in the house was deafening. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.